Hey there, Lens mates, and welcome back. It's your host, Book Lens. Go ahead and find a comfortable spot. Maybe just lie back and let this wash over you for a bit. Today, we're taking a really calm, unhurried look at a film from 2025 that really got people talking, and not always for the same reasons. Dude.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at what it was trying to be, a new Gen Z rom-com. Then we'll dive into the story itself and all its surprising twists. After that, a peek behind the camera. Then we get to the juicy part, how it became a film of two halves for so many people. And we'll wrap up by looking at the final box office numbers.
All right, first things first, let's really get into what this film is all about. So, on the surface, Dude was positioned as this big, youthful entertainer, right? It was written and directed by a newcomer, Kirti Swaran, and it dropped right during the big Diwali season. The whole idea was to mix romance, a little bit of action, and comedy to really pull in that younger crowd. The movie stars Pradeep Ranganathan. He's got that signature boy-next-door charm that everyone talks about, and Mamita Baiju. They play Ugin and Curl, who are these two childhood friends trying to figure out, that messy thing that is growing up and falling in love.
Okay, now this is where things get interesting. The story in this film doesn't just stay in one lane. It starts off one way, but then it takes some really unexpected and pretty serious turns.
And when I say whirlwind, I mean it. The plot just goes for it. It starts with this complicated love confession between cousins, Agan and Kurl. But then, Kurl reveals she loves someone else. So Agan agrees to a fake marriage just to help her escape her disapproving dad. But then their plan to flee to Canada gets totally derailed by a pregnancy and a rejected visa. This leads to this desperate plan where Agan pretends to be the father, and it all blows up in a violent climax where we find out her dad has this incredibly dark secret about an honor killing. It's a lot. And that brings us to something a lot of critics, like the Times of India here, really latched onto. The main love story is between first cousins. Even though the film tries to play them off as just childhood friends, this whole idea was seen by many as, a pretty questionable and frankly outdated trope for a movie in 2025. So what you have here is this really crucial tension, right? Underneath all that wacky fun energy, the movie is trying to talk about some seriously heavy stuff. Intercaste marriage, honor killings, all this societal pressure. And it's exactly this mix, this attempt to blend lighthearted fun with these incredibly serious themes that became the main thing everyone was talking about.
All right, so who made this thing? Let's take a look behind the camera and see how this pretty ambitious film actually got made.
So this was actually the directorial debut for Kirti Swaran, who used to be an assistant to the amazing director Sudha Kongara. And one thing almost everyone agreed on was the music. The composer, Sai Abhyankar, got a ton of praise from both critics and audiences. It was seen as a huge strength for the movie.
Yeah, the soundtrack just blew up. You couldn't get away from catchy tracks like Aurum Blood. And here's a fun fact. The song Singari was actually the singing debut for the star of the movie, Pradeep Ranganathan. So he's not just acting, he's singing too.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. We're talking about how this one film managed to completely split its audience, from critics to regular moviegoers. It created this huge divide in opinion.
And pretty quickly, a common theme started to pop up in almost every review and conversation. People felt like they were watching two different movies. A film of two halves. The first half, breezy, fun, engaging. But then, the second half just couldn't seem to keep that same energy.
And this chart right here just lays it all out perfectly.
In the strengths column, you've got things everyone loved. Pradeep Ranganathan's performance was electric. Sarath Kumar was great in his supporting role, that first half was super entertaining, and the soundtrack was a huge hit. But then you look at the weaknesses column, and it's all about that uneven second half, the weird tonal jumps from funny to serious, and a screenplay that started to feel a little too predictable. It's like a perfect summary of why people were so divided.
And if you look at the actual ratings from big publications, you can see that split in the numbers. You know, a 3 out of 5 here, a 2.5 there. They all kind of land right in that middle zone. It perfectly shows how critics saw the good, but also couldn't ignore the pretty big flaws.
So here's the big question, right? The critics were clearly torn, but what about the money? How did Dude actually do at the box office? Did the audience vote with their wallets?
Well, the numbers tell a very different story. On its very first day in India, the movie pulled in about 5.56 crore rupees just by the evening. That is a seriously strong start, right out of the gate.
And that success wasn't just limited to India either. It did really well internationally, even crossing the $100,000 mark in North America on day one. So its appeal definitely wasn't just local.
So what was driving all this success? A lot of trade analysts, like Ramesh Bala here, pointed to one thing: the star power of Pradeep Ranganathan. This movie basically cemented him as a hat-trick blockbuster actor, someone who can really bring in the crowds.
So, the consensus really seems to be this. Even though critics pointed out some major flaws in the story, the audience didn't care as much. They showed up for Pradeep's charm, for the great music, and for that fun, energetic vibe the movie was selling. It was a commercial hit, period.
And so, in the end, Dude kind of leaves us with this big question, doesn't it? What do we as an audience really want from a rom-com today? Is it just breezy fun, or is there room for these flawed, messy attempts at social commentary? It's something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this little deconstruction, Lens Mates. I'm Book Lens.